Okay, hello everybody. Just 1 second. Okay, so my name is Irene Pasquetto. I'm Italian originally, and I'm a social researcher. And I study data practices in science. I'm specifically interested in the question of making scientific data open, but even more specifically, I'm interested in understanding once this data is open, if we can reuse it, and how we can reuse it, why we can, why we cannot, under what circumstances. So I think this audience, as we have seen, is well aware of the potential benefits of making scientific data open, especially in biomedicine. And also we are, I think, pretty much aware of the possible socio-technical barriers that we can encounter if, while trying to make this data open, as the previous speaker just showed. What I'm not seeing much in the literature right now are question of, okay, once this data is made open, can we actually reuse this data? Who is reusing it? And as I was saying, under what are the circumstances, the factors that are allowing scientists to reuse this data? Okay, this is the research question I'm investigating right now. And in order to answer this question, I pick a case study, which is a consortium for data sharing, for making actually not just data sharing, but it's open data, to making biomedical data from the craniofacial community, so it's genetics and biology data available to the wider community. So a little more about this community. It's funded by NIH. And there are 11 projects all around the United States involved. We have clinicians, biologists, bioinformaticians, and informaticians that they work on this project. So we have 10 scientific spokes who are collecting the data. And then we have the engineers, informaticians who are responsible of making this data available on FACEBASE.org. So I'm a social researcher, so I just want to tell you a little bit more about our research design. We do extensive document analysis, meaning that we analyze the grants documents, all the papers, the white papers, all the documents produced by the community. Then we basically follow the scientists in the lab and observe and take notes about what they do and how they produce and they share their data. And we do the same thing with engineers. And then we interview these people and then we code our interviews. So this is about our method. Okay, some preliminary finding. What I'm observing is that there is a combination of factors that is actually making the reuse of this data pretty difficult, pretty challenging in this community. What is important to keep in mind is that these factors, they are not just one of these factors is complicating the use of this data, but it's the co-presence of all these factors together that is complicating the reuse of the data. So first of all, okay, not very surprising, the high heterogeneity of the data produced by the community. So as I was saying, we have 10 communities, 10 different projects, 10 different spokes, plus the engineering lab who is making the platform. Each spoke is producing data, not just different types of data, but also data related to different genes. So you can imagine that each of these spokes is working basically on a different gene, or 2 or 3 genes, but different within each other. And also this data differ by methods of data collection, and so you can imagine how this data is very heterogeneous. As a result of this high heterogeneity in the data, what is really difficult is to find the relationship among this data. And of course, we know that finding the relationship among this data is necessary to allow the reuse of data, because you need it in order to model the data, to organize the data in data models, and to allow then future scientists or the wider community to retrieve this data and reuse this data. Now, what is, I think, is interesting, at least for me, is that I'm realizing that the relationships among these data are not obvious at all. They are not obvious for the scientists, and they are not obvious for the engineers. And this is a fact that is not always well recognized, especially by policymakers, meaning that it seems like these data are created and they are shared out there, and then someone is going to find the relation and organize them. Actually, this is not an easy process. It's actually taking a lot of work and a lot of collaboration, hours of collaboration, communication that during long meetings between the scientists and the engineers to create these data models. And so this is the real challenge of this project. And so another factor that is complicating the reuse of the data is that this database is what I call the small data scale of the database, is the third factor. What I mean is that at least in this project, with this kind of data repositories, we don't have enough data to allow actually for overlaps among this data. So we started with a project, but we actually didn't think through or enough about how these spokes were selected in the first place in order to allow enough similarities among the data, enough overlaps among the data. Yes, I forgot to say in my introduction to the problem that I just heard yesterday during a workshop a speaker saying that since 2007 NIH invested $1.2 billion in creating this kind of data repositories. So we also have a lot of funding in creating this repository. That's why I'm also interested in understanding, okay, once we created this kind of open data project, are people using it, and why yes, why not? So, okay, the last factor that is creating, that is challenging the use of the data is that it's very difficult to understand who are the real potential users of this repository. Why? Because this repository was created, this is what the grant is saying, right, for the wider community. Now, imagine you are an engineer and you have to build a data model, okay, and you have to talk with the people who knows how this data has to be related to each other. Okay, you have to talk with the wider community. Okay, I mean, who is the wider community? You don't know exactly who you are talking to. So, and this is really challenging the collaboration, because then the engineers, what they have to do, they have to go and ask the data contributors, the time spokes that we have seen before, how they want to reuse this data. But the time spokes, they don't know now how they want to use this data because of the factor that we are seeing before, because there is not enough data to allow overlaps, and because it's very heterogeneous, the relationships are emerging, and so on. Okay, so if I could give some policy recommendation for next time that someone is creating a data repositories for opening biology data, what I would say, I would start with saying maybe we need to select a project that share interest in similar data in a way that can we lessen the complexity of the relationship between data, at least at the initial stage of the project. Then we can, open the data and the contribution to the wider community, but the project at least needs to work at the beginning. And then we have to select enough projects in order to allow for overlaps in the data, and also identify a community, a clear community of users, meaning give to the people who need to test this platform name and last name of, 50 possible candidates that they can talk to and they can test this platform with. And so this is it. I just want to thank you, my team from UCLA and our founder.